Hey guys, today on How to Do Yoga, we are going to be working with one of the most versatile back bends that there is in yoga. It is versatile because it's accessible to all levels of yoga practitioners. Every level from beginner to advanced uses this pose. And what pose is that? It's bridge pose or Setu Bandha Sarvangasana. So it is so versatile because it's accessible for all levels, like I just mentioned. We can use it at the end of class for a restorative pose. We can use it for beginners to introduce them to a deeper style of back bend. And then also for more advanced practitioners, we can use it as a prep pose to get our body ready for deeper back bends like upward facing bow or Urdhva Dhanurasana. So let's get started and let's examine this pose real quick. So I'm going to head back on our mats. All right, I'll do a quick demo here for you, real quick. So with bridge pose, we start on our backs, knees bent. And then as I lift my hips, I sweep my arms underneath and lace my hands. I continue to lift my hips, my chest is lifting, and I'm breathing. All right, so this is bridge pose. I'm going to slowly come out. And now let's talk about some alignment cues. And we're going to start with the most important, which is the distance around our feet. So two distances we need to talk about. The distance between our feet is going to be hip distance apart, and the inner edges of our feet are going to be parallel to each other. Then the second distance is the distance from our heels to our bum. We don't want them too far away. We don't want them too close. So a happy medium is once you're lying on your back, is to have enough space between your heels and your bum so that your shins have a slight backward angle to them. All right, so there's that. And then, so the second alignment cue we want to talk about is our pelvis. Because the majority of the time when we lift our hips, it can kind of get a little crunchy in the low back if we're not engaging and neutralizing our pelvis. So as you lift your hips, you want to engage your glute muscles, lengthening them down towards the back of the knees. It'll lift the front of the pelvis up towards your ribs, giving you more space in your lower back. And then lastly, as you lift up as well, a lot of times the knees will want to spread apart. Make sure your knees are never wider than your feet as you're lifting up. All right, the arms are anchoring and pressing down through the floor. I guess that can be alignment number 4. And then you can lower back down. All right, so technically I went over 4 alignments. 1, the distance of our feet between the feet, and the distance from our feet to our hips. And then the second alignment cue is the pelvis, is to rock that pelvis backwards kind of to create space for your low back so it's not all crunchy feeling. And then third, our knees. We don't want our knees to wing out wider than our feet. That kind of disturbs, that can also strain the low back. And then the arms, we want to be anchoring them down into the mat to help provide more lift for the pose. Now, some modifications for this pose. In the beginning of this video, I mentioned it can be a restorative pose. So if you've gone through 45, 50 minutes of class and you're just super pooped out, you can always make this restorative pose by taking a block, sliding it underneath your hips so they're elevated. These blocks are a little thin, so I'm just going to double up here. And then just allow the blocks to lift your hips, so it's more of a passive and restorative style of pose. That's one modification. The second modification is with our feet. If you feel that When you're lifting your hips, you still just don't have a whole lot of range of motion. You don't have a whole lot of lift. One thing you can do is step your feet a little bit wider so they're more like at their outer hip distance. Another thing you can do is turn your toes out slightly, not too much, not, 45 degrees, just a little bit. So like I'm looking up here, I can see my outer ankles and I can see my pinky toes. But that's about all I can see. So these adjustments aren't huge adjustments, but they'll be able to give you a little bit more lift in the pose if you are more of a beginner here. And then secondly, when we do lift up, when I demoed it, I showed you with my arms slid underneath me and I'm clasping my hands. Again, if that's not accessible for your body, you can always hold the edges of your mat and act like you're ripping the mat apart as you're lifting. It activates the arms the same and it anchors the arms nice and strong to the mat. Then we'll lower back down. All right, guys. So that's Setu Bandha Sarvangasana, bridge pose. We went over the alignments, again, the distance of our feet, activating the pelvis to create more space in the low back, making sure our knees are wider than our feet, and making sure our arms are anchoring down into the mat. The modifications, make it a restorative pose. Slide something underneath your hips and just let your hips rest on the blocks or whatever you may be using. The feet, you can widen the feet and turn the feet out slightly to help you get a little bit more range of motion. But always go back to that alignment cue of the knees. Don't let the knees go wider than the feet, no matter how wide they are. The knees don't go wider than where the feet are planted. And then lastly, if the clasping of the hands underneath the back isn't quite in your practice yet, gripping the edge of the mat, ripping it apart, pushing the arms down, great modification for that range of motion in the arms and shoulders. All right, guys, if you've enjoyed this and you'd like a little bit more one-on-one, I do offer private lessons through Zoom or in person. So if you are not in the area and still would like to get some teaching from me, just hit me up and we'll get together on Zoom. Also, head over, I do have many more how to do yoga videos, so head over to my playlist that I've made up for you guys and check out more videos. All right, I'll see you next time. Namaste.